Hey guys, Bartel's Bookshelf here with my June 2022 wrap up. I'm sorry, I know I'm very, very late to this, but as you can probably hear, I'm recovering from COVID. I had mild symptoms a week ago, and I thought I was getting out of it, and then I just got hit with a second wave, and I've just been laid up in bed for the last few days, coughing my lungs out, stuffed up. It's been god awful, but I'm on the mend. I'm kind of on the back end of it, I think. And I'm feeling well enough to film this wrap up, so hopefully you guys will forgive me for the delay, but I had good reasons. So obviously the main focus of June 2022 for a lot of booktubers was the June on the Range reading event that was put on by Michael K. Vaughan. And unfortunately I didn't get to read as many westerns as I would have liked. I only read 3. Because I started reading Blood Meridian for Ollie's read along that month, but I was just having so much trouble with it, and I had to DNF it because it was so slow, and I was having such a hard time getting through it, and it was like over halfway through June before I'd even gotten to any other books, so I ended up only reading 3 very short Western novels, but I did enjoy them. And I do plan to read more Westerns over the coming months. I've got a huge pile still, and I enjoyed them enough that I want to keep exploring more of the genre, but I'll talk about the 3 that I read, and then I'll talk about just the rest of the regular books that I read in the month of June. So the first book that I read for June on the Range was Long Ride Home by Louis L'Amour, one of the best-selling Western authors. I read Hondo. I don't even remember if it was last year, but it was earlier this year. I read Hondo, and I thought it was okay, but I wanted to read more of his stuff because, as I said, he's one of the best-selling Western authors ever. He sold millions of copies. Go to any Western section in a bookstore, if they have one, and it'll mostly be made up of his stuff. And this is a book of short stories. I believe it's like 8 stories. Yeah, it's a book of 8 stories. It's a very short book, so the stories themselves are very, very short. I had fun with it. It wasn't amazing or anything. Obviously, being what they are, they're very tropey, very stereotypical, but they're really entertaining. They almost have the vibe of like individual episodes of like an old 60s like Western TV show, like Have Gun Will Travel or something like that, which made them kind of enjoyable. And there's little sort of things in each story that kind of that sort of sets it apart. Like the first story in here, which is the Cactus Kid Pays a Debt. That's about this character named the Cactus Kid, who's like this young, gunslinger, and his whole thing is that he's not like your typical like Western action hero. He's young, kind of not effeminate, but he looks very boyish, and so people tend to kind of like underestimate him. But he's actually like a really badass gunslinger and stuff like that. So that was cool. And a lot of the stories have little sort of turning things on their heads a little bit like that. There was another story in here called That Trigonometry Tenderfoot, which was about a male schoolmarm who comes to this western town with this like ranch that's being fought over for like property rights and stuff. And again, like everybody kind of assumes, he's a city boy, he's just a soft-footed, he's a tenderfoot, but he turns out to be really fucking badass. There's like a pretty cool scene where some cowboy tries to interrupt his class, and he just fucking puts up his dukes and he fucking boxes the dude into submission, and that was pretty fun. There's some other fun stories in here too. Well, there was one in here called what was it? Bad Place to Die, which was like about these 2 gunslingers who are sort of like best bros, and they end up getting involved in this town, this conspiracy where they're like the people start coming after them and stuff. And that one was entertaining for me because obviously, as there often is in a lot of these hyper masculine stories, there's a lot of vibes between the characters, so that was fun for me to ship them. It was the kind of thing, like, honestly, it didn't really leave me with much of an impression. It's very ephemeral. It's nothing amazing, but for what it was entertaining. I was glad I read it. It was fun. Honestly, I don't really remember a lot of it now. It's as I said, it's one of those things. It's junk food. It's you read it, you have fun in the moment, and then you kind of just forget about it. But there's nothing wrong with that, and I had fun with it. I definitely enjoyed this more than Hondo, so I definitely want to keep exploring Louis L'Amour's bibliography. I have a couple more of his books. I have To Tame a Land and The Quick and the Dead, which some people say are some of his best stuff. So I look forward to checking those out eventually. So yeah, that was Long Ride Home by Louis L'Amour. And then the next book I read for June on the Range was High Prairie by Hiram King. I talked about this in one of my haul videos. I was really interested in this author because Michael K. Vaughan mentioned him in one of his Western videos. And he was very interesting because he's an African-American Western author, and he frequently has African-American characters in his books, and that's the case here. This is about a black cowboy named Cole Granger who... he works for this rancher who's kind of like sort of like a surrogate father, and he's meant to be delivering some prize horses to a neighboring rancher who bought them, and on the way there, the horses get stolen, and so the rest of the novel is basically his adventure trying to get the horses back, and all of the crazy stuff that happens that keeps him from getting the horses back. And yeah, this was really entertaining. Again, it doesn't really break the mold in terms of like Western tropes. It's it's all stuff you've seen before. The lone gunslinger, the greedy rancher, the corrupt town mayor, like that type of stuff. But what made it really interesting was Hiram King's perspective as an African American, and bringing that to this book. It adds a layer to it that made it a lot more deep and complex and enjoyable. It really doesn't hold anything back in terms of the ways that it talks about race. It goes into sort of the history of of black men on the frontier. There's like an inflammatory newspaper article in the book that's written that implies that a lot of these white men who are defending black people are only doing so because they have illegitimate black children, and that ends up becoming a plot point in the book. It goes into a big part of Cole Granger's character, and a big part of the reason that he's so dead set on getting these horses back no matter what, is that, as a black man, he kind of feels that he has to constantly do more, be more, work harder than the average person, because the second that you go out of line, the second that you fail, the second that you prove yourself wrong, your superiors will reject you, and so there was just a lot of that perspective that was that made the book really, really interesting. I would really like to read more of Hiram King's stuff. It wasn't an amazing book. There were some issues with pacing, I thought. There's a lot of characters, there's a lot of subplots, and for a book like this, which is very short, it's only about 215 pages, there's just a lot going on, and sometimes it was a little bit too much. Not a lot of the characters really have any chance to get developed, but there's a lot of really cool scenes, a lot of really fun stuff. There's a scene where Cole goes into a bar, and there's some racist guys in there, and he gets to show off his gunslinging abilities a little bit. He like shoots off the bottle from a table and stuff like that. Gets to be a cool cowboy. You know what I mean? It's a lot of that like typical like Western like macho kind of stuff, but went from like an African American perspective, and that made it really, really interesting. So yeah, like while I don't think it was an incredible piece of work, I would definitely like to check out more of Hiram King's stuff. I know he's got at least 2 other books, I think, that were published by Leisure, so when I'm able to, I'd like to try to read those. It's a shame it doesn't seem that like he's written very many books since then, which is a shame, because it's really nice to have these kinds of perspectives within these sort of very traditionally white genres. So yeah, I enjoyed it, and it was a lot of fun and very interesting, and explored a lot of welcome complex themes. So that was High Prairie by Hiram King. And then the final book that I was able to read for June on the Range, technically I guess this doesn't count because I finished this on July 2nd, but whatever, I'm throwing it in here. This is the classic novel True Grit by Charles Portis. Of course, this was turned into two classic films, one in 1969 with John Wayne, and one in 2010 with Jeff Bridges, directed by the Coen brothers. I saw the original True Grit a long time ago on TV, but I saw the Coen brothers version when it came out, and I really, really loved it. It's beautifully made. The cinematography by Roger Deakins is just incredible. Jeff Bridges' performance. Haley Steinfeld's amazing. But I'd never read the book. And of course, this is a classic Western novel. Everybody knows about it, even those who aren't like into Westerns. So I decided to finally read it, and June on the Range gave me the perfect opportunity. And yeah, it's a great book. I'm sure you know the story, but in case you don't, it's about a young girl named Maddie Ross, 14 years old, very determined, very independent, and her father is shot and killed by one of their ranch hands, Tom Chaney, who steals his horse and runs off. And she hires a U.S. Marshal named Rooster Cogburn, who's a very grizzled, surly guy with an eye patch, to come with her to find Tom Chaney and bring him to justice. Again, I mean, in terms of like Western tropes, you've probably seen it all before, although what sets this apart, I think, from a lot of other stories, and one of the reasons that it's so successful, I think, is because of Maddie Ross. She's a very unique character. She's very dry, very determined. She has a really unique voice. She's simultaneous. She doesn't sound like a 14-year-old girl, but at the same time, there's a lot of these moments of like immaturity that kind of speak to her age. And yet at the same time, she's like very independent. She's very determined. She's very unflinching in her descriptions of things. She's very like pious. There's lots of like her ramblings about like religion. She quotes Bible verses all the time, and a lot of the that dry, unflinching perspective lends a really unique voice to the novel, and not only makes it interesting and entertaining, but it's also really funny. Especially the interactions between Rooster and this Texas Ranger named LaBeef, who travels with them, and they have a lot of like sort of back and forth, tete-a-tete type stuff, and that's really entertaining. Yeah, it was just a really compulsively readable book. Something about it, the narrative voice is just so compelling, and I just really enjoyed something about the whole vibe of it, the atmosphere, the whole unflinching, kind of cool, sort of kind of eccentric vibe of it just made it stand out for me, and I really I just blasted through it in a few days, and I really loved it. I'm glad I finally read it, and it makes me want to watch the movie again. And now that I've actually read the book, I can say the Coen Brothers adaptation especially is very, very faithful to the book. There's a few like minor differences here and there, or some dialogue changed up and things like that. But generally, like it's very, very faithful. It's very well done. So yeah, I think if you like the movie and you haven't read the book, then you really should read the book. I think if you enjoyed the movie, you would love the book too. And I would definitely like to read more of Charles Portis' stuff at some point. I know he's kind of an unsung American author. There's quite a lot of books out of his that have kind of become cult classics. So yeah, this is probably. I know I only read 3 books for June on the Range, so it's not much to compare at the moment. But this is definitely my favorite of what I read for June on the Range. And I really want to read more Westerns, especially ones that have this kind of eccentric, unique voice to them. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time with June on the Range. I think it succeeded in what Vaughn was trying to do, which was to bring more prominence to the genre, and I'm glad that he did, because with these 3 books that I read, it really makes me want to keep exploring and find more out there and really kind of see what the genre has to offer. So yeah, that was True Grit by Charles Portis. And now there isn't much to say for the rest of the books that I read for June, because I did individual reviews of all of them. The first one was The Sacrifice Box by Martin Stewart, which I borrowed from Nikia. I really, really enjoyed that. I'll link to all of my reviews. This was a lot of fun, sort of a YA horror novel set in the 80s, British, about these kids who discover this mysterious box that they sacrifice items to, and there's these rules that they have to follow, and when the rules are broken, horrible things start happening. Really, really, really good, really fun, very beautifully written, lots of visceral violence, contrasted with like very beautiful lyrical prose. Lots of stuff about sort of the passing of friendship and nostalgia and childhood. A lot of fun. Really glad I read it. I look forward to reading more of Martin Stewart's stuff in the future. So yeah, I'll link to my review there. And then the next book I read was We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson. Again, I'll link to my review. I also really enjoyed this book. Not as much as the previous book I read by him, which was At the Edge of the Universe. I felt like it suffered from a little bit of a everything but the kitchen sink approach, trying to do too much at one time. I thought it kind of slipped into melodrama occasionally, but I think it still was very real, was very beautifully written, and was very brave to explore a lot of very dark nihilistic themes that you don't normally see in a lot of YA, and to really kind of follow through on them. I didn't feel like it was talking down to the audience at any point, which is something that bothers me about a lot of YA. And of course, it's very unabashedly queer. It doesn't apologize for that, and I loved that. So yeah, I really enjoyed that, and as I said in my review, I have a bunch of other Sean David Hutchinson books that I really want to get to, because I've read 2 now, and I've enjoyed them both thoroughly. So I really look forward to seeing what else he has to offer. And then the last 2 books were ones that I reviewed together in one video, because they both kind of dealt with similar themes. So again, I'll link to that. But I don't have the other one because it was from at the library. But that was Last Night I Sang to the Monster by Benjamin Alire Saenz, and Crank by Ellen Hopkins. They're both young adult novels that deal with drug addiction and the struggles of drug addiction. Last Night I Sang to the Monster, I thought, was a very beautifully written, very powerful, moving treatise of, the struggles of addiction, of working through trauma, and of course it also had a queer main character, which wasn't really important to the story, but the fact that it was there, I thought it was very, very much appreciated, and it was very well done. Again, similar to Sean David Hutchinson, it didn't sugarcoat anything, it didn't talk down to the audience. It went to a lot of dark places that I thought was really brave and really powerful, and I thought paid off really, really well. I guess it could be argued that maybe the ending of the book is a little bit too pat, maybe a little too happy, a little too easily solved, maybe, but I didn't mind it. I mean, I was so invested in the characters that I was like, I don't really cry at books, but like emotionally, I was like distraught. I was like, man, like fuck, So I really, really loved that book. And then that was contrasted with Crank by Ellen Hopkins, which I talked about extensively in my video, so I won't go into it again here, but basically, I just thought this book it started out interesting. It had an interesting writing style and interesting format, but it just fell into a lot of really tired, crappy YA tropes, like with love triangles and stuff like that, and I thought that it did a real disservice to the realities of addiction, where the main character's problems are solved way too easily, way too quickly, and in a way that I thought was very dishonest and irresponsible on the part of the author. A lot of it felt kind of like a weird, like, wish fulfillment fantasy thing. Just very disappointing, very unrealistic, I thought. Very, very dishonest. I really just was very disappointed in this, especially because it's a bestseller, and like everybody I knew growing up like loved this book. It was like everywhere in every like YA section of every bookstore I ever went to. So yeah, in comparison to Last Night I Sang to the Monster, this was crap, to be honest. I was really disappointed with it. But again, if you want to hear the full rant, I've got a whole video about it that you can watch, and I'll link that up there. So yeah, that was not a great one to close off the month with, but whatever. So yeah, that was Crank by Ellen Hopkins and Last Night I Sang to the Monster, and those were all of the books that I read in June 2022. Again, I was really glad to be a part of June on the Range. I really look forward to reading more Western novels in the future. And I hope to start posting more again once I start recovering from COVID. Even now, I've been talking for like 20 minutes and I'm like hot and sweating and coughing. But so I hope you guys understand if I'm like not at 100%. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you've read any of these books, what did you think? Did you like them? Did you not like them? You know, talk to me. Did you participate in June on the Range? What did you think? Did you read any good books? Recommend some westerns to me because I would love to read more. I want to be as diverse of a reader as I can be. I want to read as much as I can. So just throw all the books at me. Like I love books. So just I'm here for all the books. Just I love them. So anyway, I've rambled enough. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.